And joining us now to discuss is Nate Hochman, Inter-collegiate Studies Institute Fellow at National Review. Nate, welcome. Great to have you on. We appreciate it. As we heard in Eric's report, there seems to be a lot of mixed messaging coming out of the Biden administration when it comes to COVID policy. They're ending Title 42 next month, but yet want billions of dollars of new funding for COVID relief. Can you help us unpack this?
Right. Well, it's pretty clear the Democrats want to have it both ways on this. So on one hand, you have Biden continuing to talk about COVID funding. Just a couple weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi used COVID as an excuse to extend absentee voting allowances for members of Congress. But at the same time, they're using the end of the pandemic as an excuse to basically further weaken our border security efforts down at the southern border, which is something that left-wing activists have been pushing for a long time. So it's pretty obvious, I think, to the American people and even some Democrats that this isn't actually about public health. It's about their ideology when it comes to border enforcement, and I think that's going to be borne out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the border here. Some former Trump administration officials are encouraging Governor Greg Abbott of Texas to declare an invasion at our southern border, since that would allow for greater ability to expel migrants from the country. Curious, what do you think of that strategy, and how do you see that playing out?
Well, look, it's obviously a radical strategy. It's not something that red state leaders have taken before, but it's also clear that the situation on the border is something that requires a pretty radical response, and red state leaders down in Texas and Arizona are not getting any help from the federal government, which means that they have to take these steps. So obviously, normal immigration is not the same thing as a military invasion, but the argument that you hear from these folks, which is convincing, is that Mexico is effectively a narco state, and the immigration crisis is being engineered by cartels, which are heavily armed and militarized. And it's reasonable to think of that as actually a hostile foreign power and to respond accordingly.
Yeah, on a different note, I want to talk about Indiana. Indiana's Republican governor vetoed legislation that would ban biological males from participating in women's sports. The American Principles Project released a poll that found 42% of Indiana voters strongly disapprove and 11% somewhat disapprove of the governor's veto. And it seems, this sentiment is not exclusive to the state of Indiana. I mean, we're seeing these conversations really take place across the nation. Your thoughts?
Right. What you saw from this polling was what was apparent to a lot of us before we saw any numbers at all, which is that more socially liberal and moderate Republican governors like Holcomb, like Spencer Cox in Utah, are completely out of step with their voters on social issues like transgenderism and gender ideology. In Utah, Spencer Cox vetoed a similar legislation and was overridden by the state legislature in a matter of days. So there are real costs to Republicans who are on the wrong side of their voters on these culture war issues, and I think the polling bears that out pretty clearly in Indiana.
Not a whole lot of time left, maybe about a minute or so, but I want to get your take on this. Elon Musk, as you know, recently invested $2.64 billion in Twitter, making him the biggest shareholder and also earning him a seat on the board. I'm curious, what do you think his plan is here? I mean, why is he investing so much in Twitter when it seems many people are leaving the platform and choosing alternatives?
Well, look, I take Elon Musk at his word. He's a wacky, crazy person, as most geniuses are, but I think the man is amazing. And it's pretty clear to me that he shares a lot of Americans' concerns about the future of free speech on these digital public square platforms like Twitter, and wants to do something about it. And I think we should applaud him for that. I see no reason to be skeptical. I think the American people should be pretty optimistic about his involvement in the company going forward. All
right. And before I let you go, I want to give you the last word. What else are you following?
Just a lot of the state level culture war fights. So critical race theory, gender identity, et cetera. All of these things are things that red states are really aggressively tackling, and they're going to continue to do so. And it'll be very interesting to see which Republican governors are on the right side and which ones are on the wrong side in the coming months.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Nate, great to have you on. Thank you so much for your time and analysis today.
Thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it.